As mentioned previously, I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse planning. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Councillor Booth. Do I have a seconder to go with this recommendation? Councillor Gister. Okay, we will now go to a vote. If you support the proposal to go with the officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
2 votes, Chairman.
Okay. If you're against the proposal to go with officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
4 votes, Chairman.
Okay. So that proposal has failed. So can I ask for a different proposal? Yes. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw members' attention to the code of practice, which I think was mentioned at the last committee meeting. And what the planning code of practice says, for those who are not familiar, it says members are advised that a serious risk of challenges posed by failure to give and record clear and convincing planning reasons for the approval of planning applications where there is a history of refusals by the council. And in this case, we have a very recent refusal, which is within the last 12 months. And the code of practice also says that if the council is minded to approve an application previously refused, the proposer of the motion must state what significant change in planning circumstances has occurred since the previous decision. So that's just the council's code of practice requires that anyone who proposes that must point to a change in planning circumstances.
Is that, sorry, if I can ask a question, is
Yes.
that planning circumstances, or as we are a new committee, there are different people have different perceptions? We've had this question a couple of times, whereas today there are certainly there's 4 new faces on this today out of 7. So therefore there is a difference. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, indeed. And para 10 of the code of practice says the fact there's been a significant change in the membership of the planning committee does not justify inconsistency between current and previous decisions. So the change in personnel on the planning committee is not a planning reason for changing a previous decision.
Councillor Benny.
Now, so here we are again, in a situation where the proposal to refuse it has been rejected. We are now in a position where another proposal is probably going to be put on the table, and we have to come up with reasons. The thing is, we have got another committee. People's opinions change. And as much as what has changed, maybe significantly not, but the opinion of the decision makers has changed. And because the opinion of the decision makers has changed, how do you get around that one? Because if the committee has voted that they don't want to refuse this, and they do want to approve it, how do you get around that one? Because if it looks like the committee want to approve this, it cannot be where things can be stuck forever, where things cannot change. We cannot not have change. Because does this mean for the next 200 years this site will never be built on? Because things do change. The application itself hasn't, but we are in a position where the committee wants to approve this, or maybe we'll find out when it comes to a vote. So in terms of code of conduct, we are where we are. Members will vote whichever way. It could be that somebody will put a proposal forward to approve this application, and members could change their mind, and that proposal could fail, and then we have to go back to another proposal, which would then be to refuse it. That's really where we are. And ultimately, yes, we talk of the code of conduct, which came up in conversation last month and has come up again this month. But legally, who's going to challenge it? Who's going to put the money up for a JR on this one? And really, if they do, as councillors, no councillor has ever been sent to prison for making a wrong decision. It will be the council that picks the bill up on it. So that's where we are. And if it goes to the point and it then becomes an approved decision, Yeah, that may not sit right with the code of conduct, but we will be where we are if members vote that way. How do we get around that one then, Stephen?
Well, thank you. Well, through you, Chairman, my response would be that things do change, and the answer from the council's constitutional point of view is policy can change. You can write your own local plan. You are looking at a new local plan. This site might become part of the settlement or be allocated, and that would be a change that might justify changing in the decision. But it's right that the council has to be consistent in its decision making. So if this came before a planning inspector who looked at the council's, if the council approves it now, having refused it last year, with no change in circumstances, it would be seen as a fairly eccentric decision, not consistent with previous decisions. And I'm not saying that you must approve this, refuse this application, but I have to point this out. This is a council, not my code of practice, your code of practice, written by your members, and that's what it says. And if it came before an ombudsman, for example, rather than judicial review, an ombudsman has power to order payment of compensation and publicly declare the council is guilty of maladministration. I'm sure you members wouldn't want that to happen, but that might happen. Should you ignore your own code of practice?
But that still doesn't change the fact we are where we are. We're going to get a proposal on the table for something else, and members are going to vote a certain way. And if they vote that way, as they did last month, that is where we are with it. And the consequences of that will be dealt with later if it goes this way. Could be members change their mind and suddenly decide that they don't want another proposal, and then we'll go back to the first proposal, and then that will be refused. But that is an option that's on the table. But it will run its democratic process before we get there. So, where do we go from there, Stephen? And the thing is, you have got 4 new members on this planning committee who were not here last time, and they are entitled to have a totally different, not a difference of opinion, an interpretation of policy. And with that interpretation of policy being taken in a different light, that is also how the decisions are arrived at. Just, playing devil's advocate where we are.
Yeah, and what I would say is that the reason the code of practice says what it says is to try and encourage consistency in planning decisions. So it can't be right that new members of a committee take contrary decisions to previous historic decisions that have been made, particularly in the recent past. It's encouraging consistency in decision making, so the members of the public know which way the council is likely to vote.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think that gives us food for thought. Councillor Booth?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, the code of practice is there to try and ensure consistency and make sure that this council looks like it is acting appropriately and consistently in regard to planning applications. It's one of the big criticisms we often get, that we don't have a consistent approach. So I guess I'll just draw members' attention, was it to page 171, where obviously it was refused on the 4th of August 22, and there's the 3 main reasons: policies LP3, LP12 and LP14. That was what was the reasons for refusing it. Personally, I don't see it as being a material change in policy. That we've got an opportunity to change policy, but that's when the local plan review takes place. We don't change policy between committee meetings.
Thank you. Councillor French?
Forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. It's interpretation, what officers interpret against what members interpret it. Now, I could fully understand what Stephen is saying with the code of practice. If this had come to the planning committee last year and the committee refused it, yes, and it came back, we have to be consistent and refuse it. But as you know, over the years, many years, there is interpretation, what members say, and I think we can see this right across this afternoon's meeting, how we interpreted policies against how officers. So I think, we can be justified by having a different view to officers. And that does not take anything away from the professionalism of officers. It's just we interpret it a different way.
Thank you. Councillor Gustner?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Benning. This is why we're a democracy. Everybody's got their own views on this. All I'm looking for is, again, an element of consistency. And if members decide to vote against officer recommendations, that they come up with, we've had this before planning meeting, come up with valid planning reasons to go against officer recommendation. Thank you.
Anybody further? Councillor Benny.
Are you looking still for another proposal to go? Okay, well, I'll give you one, and if that fails, then we'll have to go back to the first one. But that members are now making an informed decision on where they are, which is why I've just said what I've said. But we are where we are. We have got to move out of this in some way. So I'll give you another proposal, and if it fails, it fails. And then we'll have to go back to the first one, which we've done here at committee before when that's not done. So, right, go against officer's recommendation and approve this application. Building in the open countryside, there is a building opposite this, and there is buildings. This is squaring the end of the village up. And many times I have said I like to see nice big houses on the entrance into a village. It sets the scene for people's opinions and how they feel about a village when they drive in. It would be nice to have some houses, and they are nice houses, and I'm sure they're very nice people who live in there. So that would cover LP3. In terms of LP12, this is not infill, but it does square the end of the village up. It does level out the boundaries where the buildings on the opposite side of this do square that up. And in terms of LP14 and the sequential test, if it's been done in Gorefield, and only Gorefield, then according to the agent, of which I've got no evidence to counter that there are no other sites there, and therefore, if there are no other sites in Gorefield, then it would be reasonable to build on here. Flood zone 3 can be built on with mitigation risk, and the mitigation will certainly be there to cover that. So they would be my reasons for going against the officer's recommendation. Does that suit, Mr. Chairman?
Right, okay, no, I'm happy. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Benny's proposal? Councillor French. Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. So we are proposing to now go against officer's recommendation. All those in favour?
That's 5 votes, Chairman.
All those against?
2 votes, Chairman.
That's been passed. And that brings to the end of today's planning committee meeting. Thank you for everybody for attending, and we will see you all next month.